Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Professor Flutterman. Welcome to MGMT 36045, which is logistics. Today, this is week one, so we'll be talking about two topics. So, Chapter 2, logistics, and Chapter 3, which is customer relationship management. But to start off, this short video lecture is going to be on logistics. So, when we look at logistics, just the high level overview of logistics and what it is. It's a very critical part of the business, of the industry, of the enterprise. It's wide, it's vast, it's a broad term, and it's incredibly important. Logistics brings a value proposition to the organization. The moving a product from one point to the other point really is what enables business, because you can't sell something if it's not at your point of sale. You can't sell something if it doesn't get delivered, and logistics is the movement of product. So, what is logistics? Logistics is it's the science or the design of the systems that control the movement and positioning geographically of raw materials, of work in process materials, finished inventories, and striving for the lowest total cost. And you notice work in process was in there. Well, that's because logistics can also be internal. So while the more common association for logistics may be it takes a truck to the port, it takes a boat to another port, it takes a train to a depot, and then a truck to your warehouse. Logistics can also be your internal logistics. It can be moving it from one operation to another. It can be moving it from the assembly line to the final finished goods warehouse. So don't let the common misconception that logistics is only for external movement of goods can block your thought. It's also the internal movement of goods. So logistics has risen to just such a high vantage point. It's a highly visible part of the organization in the contemporary business environment, and really that's because of our globalized economy. So if you look back to post-war, which was 1945 to 1995, so that period after the World War II, the U.S. Was a global leader in distributions and logistics, and that was a direct result of World War II. So if you think about it, during World War II, the United States government invested heavily in building up interstate highways for the transportation of anything involved in the war effort. It worked heavily in building up ports on the East Coast for the European front, on the West Coast for the Pacific theater, for the naval vessels, and for the shipments of goods and troops and everything to foreign battlefields. And thirdly, the airports and the technology of air travel, air cargo that sprung forward from World War II. So World War II really was a pretty significant tipping point, a fulcrum, if you will, in how logistics advanced. Also, when you look at the rise of economic development, Eastern Europe and Asia. So when you look at these markets emerging really between 1980 and 2000, these regions started to really become major exporters and distributors. And really, when you think about Eastern Europe, and even extending into Turkey and Pakistan, as the Soviet Union fell, these regions opened up to the West. And because of their lower cost of living, because of their constrained economic environments, the influx of Western dollars really was a boon for their economies. It was a boon for growth. And because of the 1945 to 1990, because of that period of economic depression due to a communist system, they were primed for low-cost production. And then from 1998, e-commerce really has shifted logistics to fit the e-commerce needs. So when we look at post-war U.S. from 45 to 95, that was bulk logistics, moving it from factory to factory, factory to distribution center to retail outlet. But now with e-commerce, it's moving it from retail outlet to customer, from factory to customer, from warehouse to customer, from distribution center to customer. It's really just such a unique hodgepodge, if you will, of logistics. So when there are great shifts in how commerce occurs, there are great shifts in how logistics must support commerce. So, um, what we can see is, if you go into the text, you can see that the cost of logistics as a percent of GDP has significantly decreased, um, even though the spend has increased historically and dropped really between 2005 and now. Um, as a percent of GDP, it has decreased, although inventory carrying costs and transportation have steadily increased. But that's because the way that we're going to market has changed. But also the GDP in the U.S. has just continued to surge time and time. And really, it is a stabilization of logistics supply. It is a leverage of economy of scale, but also when you're looking at if logistics price can stay level, mainly due to cheap oil, to cheap automobiles, to cheap trucks, to cheap methods of transportation such as rail and ocean freight, which have low infrastructure costs historically. If those can stay fixed, if those can stay flat as the GDP surges, we're going to see a percentage um, logistics as a percentage of GDP go down. So logistics is going to continue this renaissance that it's having, this reimagination that's having into the future. So not only is e-commerce shifting this, but also information technologies that are they're going to automate many of the traditional manual logistics functions. So, I think in the next decade or so, we're going to see a lot of automated port and rail operations. You're not going to have the guy working the crane at the port. You're not going to have the guy working the crane to load the rail cars. You're going to have RFID, so radio frequency identification tagging on these bulk containers coming from ports all over the world. And you're going to have an automated crane that has a scanner that in real time can read an RFID chip on or in the bulk container and then put it on the right truck, on the right rail, or to a new ship. So I think that as we further refine RFID tagging, as we have more fiber optic capabilities at our ports, and we really grow in our automation as far as equipment and real-time reading and artificial intelligence to make these decisions, you're going to see more and more automated port and rail operations, and that's actually going to drive the logistics costs down. We're also going to have advanced technologies for warehousing and inventory operations. A great example of this is the Amazon warehouse system, which is, I can just not recommend going and watching the video enough. It's absolutely fantastic. And then we're going to see our removal of some trade barriers. They're going to continue to expand global trades and logistics. The outgoing administration leveraged some trade barriers against many of our partners. And as we see this new administration come in, it'll be interesting to see how they constrict or open up trade. Because really, when you look at what would be the G8 countries, the way that they interact with each other and with the rest of the world economically can have far and wide reaching impact. So what is the goal of logistics management? The goal of logistics management really is to satisfy the customer, their expectations for delivery of a product while minimizing the total cost. We all love to shop at Amazon because Amazon Prime is free shipping. And that free shipping from Amazon Prime really is the end goal of their logistics management, is to transport goods efficiently, effectively, and as low cost as possible. And the managers must support the requirements of procurement, manufacturing, and customer accommodation. And I apologize for the yawning, everybody. So logistics costs relative to transportation costs really is the biggest cost driver of logistics. So even though we may see logistics costs going down because of automation, because of overhead decreasing over time, transport will be the highest driver of that. And as we see some of these trends in supply chain procurement coming up, such as just-in-time inventory and lean practices, it's really making the logistical transport more predictive, and it's allowing for better leveraging because logistics companies are going to know exactly how much freight they're going to have, when they're going to have it, and they can right size their shipments and really maximize every square inch of their plane, every square inch of their boat, their rail car, their truck, and really drive their rates that they charge down to their customers low as possible. So, what is the logistical value proposition? It's the commitment to the key customer, and remember that customer could be internal, it could be external, it could even be the supplier. And then there's expectations and requirements for a minimum cost. So logistics, above all else, is a commoditized item. It must have a minimal cost. We must be able to do it for as little as possible to bring ultimate value back to the organization. And the two elements of this value proposition are going to be service and cost minimization. So can we lower the cost without decreasing the service? And really the firms can make trade-offs. So if a firm is okay having a slightly longer delivery time, they can get a lower cost. But if they want it tomorrow, they may pay a higher cost. And that is a balancing act that the firm and their logistics department must play in order to support the organization as a whole. So, and going on, the text talks about some of the service benefits that are created by logistical performance in three areas. So availability, so making sure that we have inventory available to consistently meet our customers. Making sure that we have operational performance. So we have KPIs, we're meeting the KPIs, and that these KPIs are allowing us to meet our customers' expectations. So logistics is all about enabling the business to meet the customer. Even if you're looking at just bringing the raw materials in to the factory to produce, that production allows us to meet the customer's orders, and we cannot produce without material. So every single step of logistics is to meet the customer's expectations. And then the third area is service reliability, making sure that we have quality in our logistics. It's getting there on time. It's going to the right place. It's coming in the original packaging that's not been damaged. The part hasn't been damaged. The part hasn't been risked. There will be things happen. Containers fall off of a ship in the middle of the ocean. You have insurance for that. But the problem is that let's say you are making a highly desirable product and 1 out of every 10 containers in your port city, wherever it is, doesn't make your ship. And coincidentally, 10% of your annual volume is now found on the black market. That's service reliability issues. And then we look at basic logistical service. It may not fit all customers. When you look at trucking specifically, some companies may have a milk run. When I worked at Robert Bosch Steering Systems, we had a truck that went every day to Ryobi Die Casting in Shelbyville, Indiana. And it filled up every day of parts, drove it back to us. The next morning, it would take empty reusable containers, drop them off, pick up new parts every single day because what we were buying from them was a large product. It filled up an entire truck. Whereas maybe a smaller part that we were buying from an O-ring supplier in Germany, an entire year's worth of O-rings was one pallet. It was 1/53rd of a truck, 1/50th of a truck, 2% of the truck's total space. So we may bring a year in at a time, and that would be a less than a truckload. So familiarize yourself with the different types of logistics services, air freight, sea freight, rail freight, and then even when you get into the trucking freight, is it parcel such as UPS or USPS? Is it a less than a truckload where you have 1 or 2 pallets shipping on a truck with other people's freight, or is it a dedicated truck? As I've said before, cost minimization using the total cost logistics model cost is king in logistics. We're focusing on achieving the lowest possible cost Our customers are expecting that our transit costs can be as low as possible, and that we're using the cheapest individual function that we can without sacrificing service, and that we're doing these cost decisions with the customer in mind. When we look at this, there's a traditional cost model and then there's a total cost model. So the traditional cost model is just this truck driver is going to charge me at $1 per pound per mile, and that's his cost. But if you look at a total cost mile, we look at other things such as more of the service. We look at it may be $1.05 per pound per mile, but at that $1.05 per pound per mile, he guarantees that he's going to have it to us a day early. He is going to be insured, so if something happens to it, it all depends on your organization. It all depends on your product. If you're selling something cheap and simple, such as an ink pen, you go by cost. If you're Apple selling $1,000 iPhones, you look at the more well-rounded cost. I think what's important to realize is with logistics, there is no one size fits all. There is no black and white. It's completely gray, and you have to learn to operate in the gray to bring the best value back to your organization. So when we look at logistics further, like an example of evaluating alternatives to find the lowest total cost. So let's say we're shipping some electronic chips and we have a value of the shipment that's $25,000. Faster shipping is generally more expensive than slower shipping. I think we've all noticed that when we purchase at Amazon or Walmart or Target. Carrier 1 may cost $250 to ship. A Carrier 2 is $20 more, but we get it a day faster. So the product in transit is a form of inventory. So holding cost, and keep in mind that all depends on your freight terms. If you take ownership at your dock, then it's on the supplier's books. But let's say, hypothetically, for this scenario, we take ownership when it leaves the supplier's docks. So we're FOB supplier's dock. And when we consider that holding cost for a shipment is 40% of the value per year, to get it a day faster is actually no difference. So that 40%, basically saying if there's cost associated. So you need to look at that total cost. That $250 to get it here on Tuesday and $270 to get it here on Wednesday, it may seem like a 10%, 8% increase, but when you consider inventory carrying cost, if it is in fact FOB supplier dock, you may want it here a day sooner. So logistics is going to include some major functions within the business. Logistics often is going to include order processing, inventory, transportation, manufacturing or materials handling, packaging, warehousing, and it's going to be integrated through a network of facilities, oftentimes using a warehouse management system, a distribution management system, and it's going to be tied into your ERP. But all these functions are going to work together and commonly are included in kind of that greater umbrella of logistics. So the 5 functions of logistical work are interrelated. So if you look at kind of the 5 functions, you have facility network, you have order processing, inventory, transportation, and then warehousing, material handling, and packaging. And all of these link together in an integrated logistics management network. They all rely on each other. They all rely on each other being accurate and correct in order to do their role properly. Anyone that took my supply chain course may remember that we talked about how supply chain must be in line with procurement, who must be in line with sales to get the forecast, who must be in line with the customer. It's a constant data chain, and one link that breaks is going to cause a ripple effect that can really impact numerous other departments and really, at the end of the day, severely impact how you can service your customer. So that's logistics in a nutshell, kind of a high level introductory for you. But I would encourage you to read the text, read through materials for the course. Any questions you have on logistics, please reach out to me. I'm here to talk to you about it. Any of you that are looking at going into logistics or supply chain or procurement, um, keep in mind that as we become more globally complex as an economy, the need for a robust and flexible logistics network is going to grow by the day. So I hope you found this interesting. I look forward to interacting with you in the course. But that was a very high level to logistics. And as always, any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Thank you.